So basically, this work, all this what I'm going to tell you tonight was my MPhil dissertation 14 years ago. 14 years ago? Yeah, thereabouts. 2014 I finished, so 12 years ago. I'm not a major in archaeology or in architecture or anything like that. Basically, my dissertation first, my idea was the trade of medieval Cork. I'm a Corkman, maybe you picked that up already. So I was doing on the trade of medieval Cork. I had a review after 2 months, and they asked me just to pick one commodity. I was just after finishing reading a paper written by Dudley Waterman. It was published in the Ulster Journal in 1970, and it was on Dundry stone that was discovered on east and south coast of Ireland, introduced by the Normans, men like William Marshal and people like that. So I jumped at this. A couple of weeks later, I'm realising, oh my God, I'm doing architecture and all this kind of stuff, which I wasn't really into. But anyway, it was to do with the Normans and to do with the trade and masons as well and things like that. So it was really, really, really interesting. Okay. So I'm sure everyone here knows who the Normans are. So just to give it, there was two main phases in the invasion, 1169 to 1171. Those who basically came on the invitation of Dermot MacMurrough. I'm sure everyone knows that story. And then the second phase, 1171 onwards, those who came with Henry II and after. William Marshal, of course, being one of these. Okay, this is to do with a lot with the patrons who brought in this stone as well. Unfortunately, we don't have records of people who brought in the stone. There's no receipts or anything like that, unfortunately. But we do know that William Marshal built a lot of things here in Wexford, and even in Carlow and other places that you see as well. But we know he introduced this stone, Dundry stone, which I'm going to tell you about in a few moments. He also used it in Pembroke Castle and Usk Castle and places like that in Wales as well. Okay. So I love this. This is from the Ross Tapestry. Dermot MacMurrough showing Robert Fitzstephen. This is Wexford. Some people have said it's Strongbow, but that wouldn't make any sense. Certainly Robert Fitzstephen. Showing in Wexford town, this is going to be yours. So unfortunately, Robert Fitzstephen doesn't show up with any of evidence of Dundry stone. The distribution of this imported stone between the 12th and the 14th century, as I said earlier, it's along the east and the south coast of Ireland. It's all found on rivers, close, I think. Wexford, certainly, and Dublin City have the largest amount of this stone ever identified. They're still finding it. I'm sure if somebody was excavating in Dublin City today, they probably found Dundry stone. It's been found in Dublin all the time. A lot of the stuff in Wexford is being found in situ, in buildings, whereas Dublin, a lot of it is still in buildings, of course, but a lot of it is found during excavations as well. Okay, Dooting stone, a small bit in Wexford. Painswick stone, none in Wexford. Bat stone has been found in Wexford as well. Purbeck marble. There's a question over that. I saw something the other day. There may be Purbeck marble in Wexford, but none identified. It's mainly found in Dublin. There's a small bit found in Cork, and loads of it found in the Black Friary in Trim in County Meath about 10 years ago. I just put this up. This is St. Canice's, obviously, Cathedral in Kilkenny. I'm sure Wexford had a lovely door like this in Dunbrody or something like that at one stage that doesn't exist anymore. But I think this is a lovely example of Dundry stone. So this is the Dundry stone. It's yellowish, creamy colour. Why were they using this? They're certainly bringing it in from, and I'll tell that in a second, but some people have suggested, and it was one of my theories as well, that this was kind of, I suppose, the light of God in the church and stuff like that, because this being the west door in St. Canice's, people would have been brought in, certainly for baptism. They're brought through the west door. The font then inside would have been just inside the west door, so you're kind of coming through heaven kind of into to get baptised. Show and tell, I have a piece of Dundry stone here. You can pass it around and have a look at it. I'll talk a bit about the geology as well, and you will see geology in that stone. Okay? Thank you. So excavated sites, again, just like the map you saw a while ago, and the in situ. So these are all standing remains. It's been 12 years since I did this. I read my thesis for the first time 2 nights ago in 12 years. I'm sure a lot of people who wrote a thesis probably never read it again. I'm a bit confused by this dot. I can't remember what that is, and it's not in my thesis. But this is an example found in Tralee, one small little piece. Again, reuse, another thing I'm going to mention as we go on, okay? But again, you can see this more clearly. It's all found on rivers, okay, or close to rivers, which helped the transportation of bulky goods, okay? So stone being very expensive, certainly to transport. They wouldn't have been using roads. It's a lot cheaper to transport heavy goods over rivers. So the examples in Wexford: Bannow Church, the medieval church down in Bannow, Tintern Abbey, Dunbrody, St Mary's in New Ross, Selsker Abbey, Clonmoynes, Hook Lighthouse. Well, Hook Lighthouse, there was fragments found during excavation back in the 1980s around Hook, probably associated with a church that was down there for the monks, the chapel that doesn't exist anymore. Ferns Cathedral, Churchtown down by the Hook, Frederick Castle, Tom Haggard and Churchtown, very similar evidence. Small piece found in Carrick, site down where the Crimean War Memorial is in the Irish National Heritage Park. And then there was baptismal fonts. The St Mogue's Church in Feathered, that font originally was in Dunbrody, I believe. Bannow font is now in Carrick-on-Bannow in the church, and the font, which you would have seen at the very first slide, that's now in Johnstown Castle. It was discovered in the church, just outside the church, on the grounds of the church in Rataspic, just a few years ago. Well, actually, not a few years ago. So a bit of the geology. So this is Dundry stone under the microscope. Those of you looking at that, you'll see all the shells on it. So Dundry stone, like these, is basically oolitic limestone or oolitic limestone, okay? Which can stone isn't oolitic. It comes a little bit later. But Dundry stone, Painswick stone, all those stones, bat stone, they're all oolitic limestones, okay? They all look different under the microscope. They were formed about between 165 and 145 million years ago, okay, when Britain and Ireland were in warm water, basically. You can see these type of shells, the ammonites in these shells, it's all made up of seashells that hardened, sunk to the bottom of the ocean and hardened over 165 million years, okay? This is the oolitic limestone belt here in going up England. The stone I'm talking about, the stone that has been identified in Ireland, all comes from the Bristol area, Somersetshire, okay? Which, of course, helped with the trade, certainly with Wexford, because there was great connections between Wexford, as other places in Ireland, but certainly Wexford and Bristol. First port of call, of course, for Dermot MacMurrough when he went over to England to seek the help of Henry II. Going back, well, I suppose between the Jurassic Age and the Anglo-Rival and Anglo-Normans, the Romans were using it. Best example in England is the Roman bats in Bath in England, all used carved using bat stone. I'm sure there's other types, Dundry stone and stuff in it as well, but those quarries in Bath were used for that. This was discovered in 2013, an eagle. It's made from Dultic stone. They found Dundry stone plaques and things like that in London and other parts of England, so the Romans were certainly using it as well. This was discovered in 2013, an eagle. It's made from Dultic stone. They found Dundry stone plaques and things like that in London and other parts of England, so the Romans were certainly using it as well. One of the early evidence of Count stone in London is the Tower of London, the White Tower built in 1078. Canterbury, the cathedral used it as well, and Canterbury also used Dundry stone and Purbeck marble. Purbeck is a black marble. When it polished, the side shines up. It's mainly used for pillars, so the pillars inside Canterbury are made from this Purbeck marble. Again, made up of shells and things like that. When you think, as I said, the best example of it was discovered here in County Meath. I'll show you an image of that towards the end. Wells Cathedral, if you can kind of make out this map, Wells Cathedral actually owned it around the quarries in Dundry and Doolting for a while. So Dundry Stone Quarry, Doolting Stone Quarry, Purbeck's down here, Painswick is over along there. The stone is named after where the stone is quarried. Dundry is quarried in the Dundry Hills just outside Bristol. So what was taking place at this time? Who was involved? There was a movement of architectural ideas across Europe at this time, and the masons, certainly the stonemasons, were heavily involved in this. Who were the architects at this time? The masons were. The master mason, a term that didn't come until much later. But certainly the monks and stuff as well were the architects of these churches. Of course, we're changing from Romanesque into Gothic at this time as well. So when the Anglo-Normans arrived in Ireland at that time in the 1167, between 69 and 71, into Wexford and into Ireland, there's this massive change going on in architecture, and of course we have the religious reform, or the church reform going on in Ireland as well. One of the many ideas I suppose Henry II had of getting his hands on Ireland was using the church reform as an excuse. So the Anglo-Normans, basically the same way as the Normans, when they arrived in England after 1066, they started importing cornerstones you saw in the White Tower, in the Tower in London. When the Anglo-Normans arrived here in Ireland and indeed in Wexford, they were continuing a building tradition they had started in England, okay? And they were stamping their authority by building in stone. I suppose this came here first, they're building in Motte and Bailey's. They were, for a short while, then they started building stone castles, and of course, first of all, building churches as well. They're stamping their authority on the country, saying basically, this is who we are, and we're here to stay. They're building permanent structures. So just about Masons, just for a little bit, the buildings of cathedrals, and look, religion was very big at this time, very important to people in the 12th and 13th, throughout the Middle Ages, of course, as it still is today. But to build, like most people, if they could, they went on crusades and things like that. Others, if they couldn't, they stayed behind. They became patrons of churches and stuff like that. Much to Dermot McMurrough was a patron of the Augustinians. But basically this image from this folio, French folio, or French manuscript, basically shows these monks and God giving them directions basically on how to build their towers, their churches and things like that. The stained glass window here in Cathedral again shows, look, you can see from there, a lot of stained glass windows is usually made up with pictures, images of saints and things like that. Here we get the Masons, okay, showing their trade, just showing how important the Masons were at this time. So why did they import? It's a status symbol, it's a display of wealth. They're continuing their building traditions, as I already said. Demonstration of skills and craft, of course, from the Mason. Demonstration of patronage towards the church. It's a cultural choice, cost effective and easy to carve. And that's the thing with these stones, like cornstone, batstone, and of course Dundry stone. They were easy to carve. It's a limestone. I'm sure you're looking at that. It looks like, or feels like a sandstone. They're known as a limestone, so it's much easier to carve. And one of the things as well, with my theory, and that's Dudley Waterman paper back in 1970, the question was this stuff coming in, was this stone coming in ready carved? These fine pieces, and you should see a few of these in a few moments, but were they coming in already carved, or certainly the stone cut down to size so that it would have been carved at the site of wherever they're building their church or cathedral in the Mason's Lodge by the banker Mason who designed all the finial and stuff like that. William Marshal, of course, was certainly he's involved with a lot of the sites here in Wexford. As I said, it's found in Pembroke and places associated with him in Wales and in England as well. So the Hook Lighthouse he built, he was on his way over here in the late 12th century, and he was caught in a storm, and he swore that he would first build the monastery, which was Tintern Abbey, but he built the lighthouse down in Hook as well. But I'm sure most of you know there was already monks down in Hook for nearly since the 6th century, lighting fires and stuff to guide ships in. So they just continued that by building more permanent structure and building the Hook Lighthouse. St Mary's in New Ross, of course, himself and his wife Isabel. There's loads of examples in New Ross. Carrig, the site again in the Irish National Heritage Park. There was a small few pieces found there. Small bit found in Furnace Castle. That's wrong, sorry, that should be Feather Castle, excuse me. There's none found in Furnace Castle, and that's the thing. There's a question, there was always a question, as I said, look, I'm not a geologist. I had one or two geologists come around to the sites in Tipperary and Cork with me and re-looked at some of the stuff that was recorded back in the 70s. The stuff that I looked at, for example, in Swords in Dublin in the National Museum storeroom there, it had all been looked at by geologists, and it was all said it was Dundry stone. But there was a question over Furnace Castle. Was that in the little chapel in Furnace Castle, was that Dundry stone? But that should be Feather Castle, and it's not associated with William Marshal. Clonmines, of course, as well. Douchgabbie in Kilkenny and Carlow Castle have Dundry stone also. Now, I suppose not really the earliest evidence of Dundry stone, or indeed Canstone, but Canstone in Mellifont is the only medieval evidence we have of this stone in Ireland. Certainly used later on in the 19th and of course in the 20th century. Canstone's been reintroduced, but the earliest evidence we have, and the only evidence, medieval evidence, is Mellifont Abbey in County Meath. And Dundry stone was also found there as well. Again, lots of the stuff that was found, lots of the Dundry stone and even Canstone was found during excavation, so now they're all being stored in the chapel house. If you go to Jerpoint Abbey, for example, in Kilkenny, you will see Dundry stone on display in the chapel house as well, the same as you see in Tintern. This is one of those pieces, Canstone. You'll see the mason's mark here. Again, very important to the mason. They knew who cut the stone, but of course, the mason's mark was to see how so they know who to pay and how many stones they cut, and they get paid that way. So it was their mark. This is a very unusual one found down in Dunbrody. Now we're getting into it, guys. I'm going to show you examples of the sites in Wexford, okay? But I just want to talk a little bit about the mason. But this mason mark in Dunbrody, you can see there, this was also discovered in Holy Cross Abbey in Tipperary. So again, the same mason working at both sites, but a very unusual mason's mark to be. So usually they're X's and stuff like that, like you see in that one. Usually they're marks like that. But this one here in Dunbrody, very unusual. Just about the masons, Dundry stone is a free stone, meaning it can be cut any way. So this is just diagonal tooling. This is a sarcophagus or sarcophagi in St Mary's in New Ross. There was 30 known Anglo-Norman stone sarcophagi recorded back in the early 90s in Ireland. Was it 5 or 6 of them were carved with Dundry stone? All the others are local stones and things like that. But the only imported stone was Dundry, and there was only 6 out of the 30. So I think that these might have been among the first items that were introduced to Ireland, carved of Dundry stone. The first one being the Banno one. This now is down in Carrigal Banno Church. The reason I say that is because Banno Church, first of all, the one on Banno Island, or what used to be an island, that dates to 1188, 1190. The fonts date to 1188, 1190 as well. All these 3 fonts. And in fact, there's 5 medieval fonts, or Dundry stone medieval fonts, in Ireland. 3 of them are in Wexford, okay? The other one is in Inistioge in Kilkenny, It's held in the Church of Ireland Church there in the village, and the other one is St. Auden's in Dublin, okay? And can all be seen. The Bannow one is special because that's carved from one single piece of stone, one block of Dundry stone. Whereas you can see here, and both of these, you can see down here, that's two single stones, that's two single separate stones as well. You can see the split at the end. But that's very special. And they could probably, Roland, you saying, you think they might have been all whitewashed?
Well, that one is whitewashed.
Yeah, this one certainly is whitewashed today. So whether they all were back in the day, we don't know. But certainly that's a modern, I suppose, modern whitewash on that. It's not still on it since the 12th century. But it's possible, the same way a lot of churches would have been whitewashed as well. It's quite possible that they may have been painted as well. But these two, the same molds, and the Bannow, I suppose we should say Dunbrody and Bannow and Dunbrody look very similar. We have the fleur-de-lis design on it. There's not much design, if at all, on this one. Actually, I have an image of it here. This is the St. Auden's one. I call it the E.T. baptismal font, but that's just over time, it's cracked, unfortunately. This one, there's a good story behind this one, actually. This was buried in the church. And there is a thing with that they do bury old objects before they introduce a new one. But this was buried, they say, during the Cromwellian Wars. And it was later rediscovered and placed back in the church. But you can see the scallop shells here. Scallops, of course, associated with baptism. This one then is just an example, no art style at all in it, but very similar to these ones, and found in Wales. But somebody obviously has graffitied it over the last 800 years. But that dates as well to the same 1188, 1190. Just one example that I was able to get a picture of on the Carrick site. Again, a piece that escaped my thesis. I didn't have that, I didn't know about it. I moved to Wexford 8 years ago and started working in the Irish National Heritage Park. And I was, actually the first question I was asked, well, one of the first questions I was asked when I joined the Heritage Park was, did I know where Robert Fitzstephen's castle was? I said, oh yeah, that's across the river there or something. She said, no, it's here. And I was lucky enough that the excavations had just begun on the site. I suppose the most recent excavations had begun on the site. That was found in the 1980s. Again, this associated with Marshal and his family. Bannow Church, just put in the Bannow font again. It's found in the windows in the archway there. Of course, we have another sarcophagi, and a grave slab. This I need to look at. It could be poured with marble, even though it kind of looks like Dundry stone there, but there's no evidence of it. You'll see in St. Mary's in New Ross in a while, there's effigies, but for a grave slab to be carved of Dundry, they haven't been discovered in Ireland. So it quite possibly could be poured with marble. I must go down and have a look at it. I've done nothing on this in the last 12 years, besides do 2 different talks, and one was 8 years ago, but I've never really looked at it. As I said, I'm just re-investigating it again. So I need to look at that, because in the 12th, 13th, 14th century, it was considered a high status to be buried underneath poured with marble. Okay, as I said, there was one grave slab of poured with marble discovered in Cork from the old Dominican Priory. There's loads of them in Dublin, St. Patrick's, St. Auden's, and Christ Church Cathedral. Loads of poured with marble grave slabs, so that could be poured with marble. Tintern Abbey, loads of examples here. This is the fine work I was on about that the masons or the banker mason would complete in the lodge on site. So, about the importation, they could have imported already cut blocks, and then the final work was carried out at the site. Okay, these rosettes here from this 12th century piece. All right. Okay, the chapter house, the Corbett and the chapter house. This red sandstone is possibly later, but there's another theory on that, and I'll show you when I get to Dunbrody. This is Dunbrody here. So we have Local sandstone, and this is 12th century, early 13th century, mixed with Dundry stone. Again, the red and just colours are very important in medieval in the church. To do with, and still is today, but to do with Easter and things like this. The yellow certainly for Easter, and the red, the blood of Christ. And it's also found in Tintern. You go into Tintern, you're walking down towards the entrance, I suppose, if you're going down into the woodland, just there, that first window, the trio of lancet windows on your left-hand side, you'll see the mix of the red sandstone and the Dundry stone. More examples from Dunbrody. We have the window jambs in the trio lancet windows. In all the transept chapels, it's found as well. Look, you can see it all along here. So, very large amount of stone being imported into Wexford in the 12th and early 13th century, certainly. These are found in lots of different churches. There's one in St. Muldo's and Kinsale and stuff, for example, these little recesses in the little transept chapels of Dundry stone. There's a number of them around the country. St. Mary's, the trio lancet windows here, that's the inside and out. Just as well, I was talking about fragments of architecture. There's lots of fragments down the Tintern. There was over 1,400 pieces of stone discovered on the site. I suppose back when the OPW took it over, and 60% of that is Dundry stone. So there's an awful lot of Dundry stone. That's ex situ, so not on things. So you can see when you go down to Tintern, there's lots of stone on display there. That's not all of it. There's others somewhere else. This is the effigy I mentioned earlier on, and this is the sarcophagi beneath it. Okay, this is in St. Mary's as well. It's quite possible that this effigy could have been on top of that sarcophagi. All right. This one, just to show you again, this is very similar to the one that was discovered in Cork. This is an effigy from, it's now in the crypt of Christ Church Cathedral. If you go into the Driscoll Art Centre in Cork, you can actually see this through a window. It could have been from, some people have suggested it could have been from the Dominican Priory that once stood just outside the walls of Cork City. This certainly came from the Dominican Priory. It's a Dundry stone sarcophagi. I was told it was found in the ground like this. I don't believe that. I spoke to two different archaeologists that excavated the site. One said it was found like that. It was broken in the ground when they discovered it. And the other archaeologist told me, no, that archaeologist got a sledgehammer and broke it to get it out of the ground. So it was taken out of the ground in 13 pieces. And they're not all there. You can see the drainage holes here in the front as well. The recess, I'll show you a better example from Wexford Town in a minute, but you see the recess where the head, that's to keep the head in place. Well, that was the idea, to keep the head in place of when the judgment day, that the body would rise up and the head be looking straight at whoever was coming, basically. This is a Doulting stone effigy, the only one found in Ireland, in St. Mary's as well. Dundry stone jams around the doorway. This is what I questioned. This might be Purbeck marble. I wasn't looking for Purbeck marble down in Neuros when I went there about 13, 14 years ago. But it quite possibly could be Purbeck marble, because it's very, very similar to those found in Christchurch and St. Patrick's and St. Dalton's in Dublin. Again, pieces like that, certainly, like the cross slabs, they certainly were probably coming in ready carved. You're basically ordering your, people are ordering their cross slabs and stuff from England, which would have taken a lot of time back then. This is all that remains of an effigy carved of backstone, discovered in St. Mary's as well. Probably would have been similar to the one on the wall there. Just to point out as well, we're glad going back, this is resting what we believe on a dog, this effigy. The effigies in Christchurch of Purbeck marble and St. Patrick's, a lot of them were to do with knights as well, but their legs would have been resting on lions. I'm not too sure if this is Dundry stone, but these pieces certainly are. but it's kind of reddish in colour. There's another stone that's kind of red. But unless this was fire damaged, it could possibly be Dundry stone. And I'll tell you why in a few moments. Let me show you another example from somewhere else. But loads and loads of Dundry stone found in St Mary's in New Ross. At Churchtown down the Hook, very similar to evidence found in or identified in Tom Haggard. Again, Tom Haggard wasn't on my thesis. I was told about Tom Haggard when I arrived in Wexford 8 years ago, and seeing that there's the old part of the OG windows or OG windows. There's a stone jam in one of the windows as well. There is presumably a recess, much like that one, but not as elaborate as that one in St Mary's. Down here in Churchtown, that waterman recorded that it was Dundry stone. I only discovered one recess down there, and it was like local limestone. It wasn't Dundry stone, but it was certainly the one in Tom Haggard is of Dundry stone. Selfscrabbie, probably one of the last or latest introduction of Dundry stone to Wexford. That and Feathered Castle. This, now that looks a lot better broken in the ground. Obviously that was damaged over the years, but it's in the ground, it looks better than the one in Cork. In fact, when I went up with the curator of the Cork Museum, we went up to the council storeroom looking for the effigy. We're looking around, there's boxes of stone and boxes of artefacts all over the place. Could not find the effigy, and as we were leaving the storeroom, I noticed these 3 pallets, and the sarcophagi was in 13 pieces on those 3 pallets. This one I just took the other day. This is St John's Cemetery. Is it Dundry stone? I don't know. As I said, I'm not a geologist, but it might hopefully get someone to look at it. Any books I've seen or I've looked it up, nobody records what kind of stone it is, but it quite possibly might be Dundry stone. I'm sure some people who have ever been into St John's Cemetery in Wexford Town would have seen this standing up there. But again, very similar to the other ones. Look, you can see the drainage holes in the coffin or sarcophagi. OG headed windows in the tower of the Hook, in Feathered Castle. As I said, Selfscrabbie, and certainly these dates are about the middle of the 14th century. So we're talking 1330s, 1340s when that stone was introduced here in Feathered, and it's only small pieces. I suppose in the Episcopal Castle, the same in Swords. It's only found in the windows in Swords Castle as well, related to John Comyn, Archbishop of Dublin, at one time. Another theory was this stone, because there's so little of it found in some places, was it actually coming in used as ballast in a ship? Okay, certainly if they're bringing in stone ships, they're not going to go back empty-handed, so they would have had some stone on the ship to bring back if they're bringing back, say for example, Dundry stone coming into New Ross. William Marshal, known for trading in wool and things like that from New Ross. Certainly New Ross is known for trading in wool and stuff, and wool hides that they would have been sent back. There would have been stone on the ship. There's loads of evidence all over Europe, up in Scandinavian places, of stone being brought in, used as ballast, and then used to pave streets and stuff like that in different places in England and up in Scandinavia. So the distribution of Dundry stone, we're going to emphasise the reliance on waterborne transport. As I said earlier on, it was cheaper to transport by water, through waters. The areas are close to rivers. You would have seen that, of course, on the maps that showed you at the start. The majority of the imported stone, it all comes from Somersetshire, Bristol especially. Dundry stone is the main stone found here in Ireland. And I've mentioned this a few times as well, it wasn't coming in pre-carved before it was transferred to save costs. The Campoyne River here behind Dunbrody Abbey, you can see the shore off in the distance. Rivers like this, like the Slane and stuff, certainly would have assisted all this trade in throughout Ireland. Certainly not just Wexford, but all the rivers in Ireland were used. They were the motorways of medieval Ireland, basically. If anybody ever been up in the crossing tower of Dunbrody? No. try and get up there. I think it's closed off. We were lucky that day I was down there. There's actually a dovecot up on top. This is just to show you a few other examples from around the country. This is the Deanery, or one-time wine cellar, which is now the Waterford Medieval Museum. It was the Wexford Medieval Museum there for 24 hours yesterday, but that got changed. But it's certainly the Waterford. If you're ever in Waterford, go to visit it. It's part of the museum. It's a lovely piece of work. So this is all Dundry stone here around the pillars. Again, just next to the medieval church, you can see this. I was lucky enough to be able to climb down. You can see the ladder there. But that's one of the old medieval, massive pillars, part of the old medieval Christ Church cathedral in Waterford. And then there's loads of fragments of this Dundry stone lying around it as well. Example from Cork. I just have to put more Cork in there. You can see this. This is the old doorway of the old medieval church of St. Finbarr's in Cork, as they were demolishing the building. Now it's up just behind, and one of the back walls used up, but at least they kept it. We don't know if Dundry stone was used in any of the other parts of the old medieval. Surely it might have been used in the windows and stuff like that, but it's just not recorded. And this wasn't identified as Dundry until 1969, 1970, when Dudley Waldman was carrying out his research. More from the Franciscan Friary in Drogheda. I suppose the thing about stone, it's not treated like other artefacts. It's not like a piece of gold or anything like that. It's not going to be put on display. There is one piece from Drogheda from Bachelor's Day, the same as these, on display in the National Museum. Well, it was about 10 years ago, the last time I was up there. All these, thankfully, were given to me by one of the archaeologists that excavated the site. When I contacted him, he has these up in his back garden. So it's not kept the same as anything else. Lots of this Dundry stone, when I contacted archaeologists about it who excavated the sites, told me they had stuff at home. This is the tassel tomb now in Cashel. This was a tassel tomb from associated with the Burks family. This is what I talked about. This had fire damage. So this is why this is Dundry stone, but it's turned red after being fire damaged. This is part of the tomb taken from a tassel in Tipperary and now in Cashel, on display in the visitor centre in Cashel. The other parts of it are in Kilkenny in the council buildings. This is Purbeck marble coffin slab from Christchurch. This is one of hundreds of pieces of Purbeck marble discovered in the Black Friary in Trim. When I visited this site actually a number of years ago, the excavations at the Black Friary in Trim, two people came up to me, and one student who was digging on the site asked me really excitedly, "What are you doing? What's your research?" And I said, well, I'm looking into all the Dudley Waldman's, I'm reviewing Dudley Waldman's paper and looking into all this important stone like Dundry stone and everything. I should look at it, basically the colour went from her face, and all right, best of luck with that, and walked away. Wasn't impressed. And then another guy came up to me and said, "What are you doing?" I told him, and he said, "I wanted to do that," and I was told, "Stay well clear of it." Other products that came out of these Dundry stone as well were these byproducts of the quarries at the time. This is a mortar. I had this on my desk in UCC for 2 years. This was discovered on the South Main Street excavations back in 2001, 2000 to 2003. But as I said, I was lucky to have that. So it's like a mortar, pestle and mortar. This is a candle holder. This would have been a full circle. There would have been 2 or even 3 handles on it, certainly 2, and there would have been space for 4 or 5 candles in it. That's from Waterford. And then this is like a little stone box. Was there a small little fragment, and somebody said, "Oh, I'll make a little box for someone." They put a ring in it. It's actually that's actually the size of it. But therefore, that's also from Waterford. But certainly the mortars, there's evidence of Purbeck marble mortars and Dundry stone mortars found all over Europe and Germany and places, and of course all over England as well. So this wasn't a trade. They weren't just doing this as a sideline. But certainly, probably in the winter months, when the masons weren't working on the cathedrals and things like that, they may be making mortars and stuff. But certainly they would have been finalising nice detail on stone as well. But it could have been a byproduct of the architectural work. So subsidiary commodities, the castles of Feather, certainly Selchgar should be in there as well, swords of Dungarvan. It only appears in small quantities, so I mentioned that already about was it being used as a ballast. But that doesn't really make sense. Why would they say, oh, we'll use that and we'll put it in the window here? But certainly they were probably just emulating, copying other buildings and using whatever small piece. But certainly there is a drop in the importation of Dundry stone into Ireland in the middle of the 14th century. Number of different reasons. We get there's the Black Death, there's the Bruce invasion, there's the Gaelic revival. There's lots of different reasons behind why that trade kind of fell out of the stone. Local masons, Irish masons, getting more familiar, able to work with local stone, of course, also. Ready-made, certainly the mortars that have been found in Cork, Waterford and Dublin, certainly a byproduct of the quarrying industry. As I said, we found in Germany, Denmark and Belgium and England as well. Examples, the mortar examples found in King's Lynn in Norfolk come from different areas of England and from France, made from cornstone. Okay, none of these. Well, I suppose we know cornstone is certainly being quarried again, but the Dundry stone certainly, or Dundry quarries in Dundry Hill certainly died out in the 15th century. There's only very small quantities of Dundry stone quarried now. The Neolithic stuff is gone. The stuff that we're using in the Middle Ages is certainly gone. So more modern use of imported stone in Ireland. This is the museum at Trinity College. This, of course, is cornstone. Certainly a lot more whiter than the creamy yellowish Dundry stone that was being introduced. We have Ladies' Chapel in St. Patrick's. This was introduced in the 19th century when they refurbished as well. And of course we have Our Lady's Island here. I haven't been in it. This photograph was sent to me, so it's certainly used. There's stone from all over Ireland actually being used inside that church, I've read, so that's good, but it is quite nice. So this is the cornstone up along here, these heads, and it's found in other places as well. Guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If any of you have any questions, please go ahead.